stand plausibly with its British counterparts. I suspect Americanists might have a bone to pick with me on that subject, but from my own vantage point, that's the way it looks. Even so, the first American writer that I know of who achieved something like bestseller status, and indeed to some degree in England as well as in the United States, was Washington Irving, who lived from 1783 to 1859. He was fond of pseudonyms of one sort or another, and his first really successful book is written pseudonymously under a name which has gone on to its own subsequent life in other realms. The History of New York, which came out about 1808, was purportedly written by an old Dutch settler of New York of the name of Diedrich Knickerbocker. And talking about Knickerbocker, New York, and the New York Knicks and things of that ilk goes back to Irving's playful history of the early days of New Amsterdam and the noble Dutch colony. His other big hit was the sketchbook, which came out in 1819, 1820, and that consisted of a series of shorter works, two of which in particular, which are supposedly, I do not know the details of this, but are Americanized reworkings of German legends. Two of them have gone on to subsequent notoriety and remain familiar, one being, of course, the legend of Sleepy Hollow, about Ichabod Crane and Bram Bones and the beautifully plump Katrina Van Tassel and the Headless Horseman, and the other Rip Van Winkle. And that is round one. It's surprising, especially considering the prominence of New England, the flowering of New England, and the focus that one often gets in reading about early American literature on New England and Boston. All that in view, it's surprising how many of the early practitioners were, in fact, New Yorkers. It seems to me that New York may have gotten a little bit of a short shrift. In any case, the next figure to make his mark is another New Yorker, though from upstate, James Fenimore Cooper, 1789 to 1851, whose family were prominent among, unsurprisingly enough, the early settlers of Cooperstown, New York, which is indeed named after his family. And Cooper, after his first big success in 1821, The Spy, which is a novel about the American Revolution, is most celebrated for the Leatherstocking Tales, as they are called, written between 1823 and 1841, which focus on New York and, for the most part, the colonial history of New York, which is, in fact, rich and interesting, with the Iroquois, the Mohicans, the Delawares, the French, the English, and so forth, jockeying for position. The most famous of the Leatherstocking Tales is The Last of the Mohicans, which was, in fact, the second one written. They all feature Hawkeye, or Natty Bumppo, who is actually in the books not very often called Natty Bumppo, and where Cooper got the name Natty Bumppo, I have no idea, but he is the quasi-mythical figure, the frontiersman, and so social historians are inclined to argue kind of the frontiersman, the prototype of a whole series of later mountain men, cowboys, lumberjacks, and people who are half Europeanized and half the product of the world without. They're pretty good stories, as a matter of fact. A later American writer, Mark Twain, wrote at length